This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. It's Google I.O. Day 1. We're done with it, and we have a lot to say. My guest is David Imel of Android Authority. Hi, David. How are you?
I am back.
You're back.
Yes.
And we're caffeinated.
We are caffeinated.
It is late on the day.
Yeah.
We are actually close to the next day.
Uh-huh.
What was your first day of Google I.O. like?
It was good. It was a lot this year. You know, last year was my first I.O. and there wasn't really hardware, and it was mostly like announcements and software announcements. But this year we had quite a bit of hardware, quite a bit of allowing us to speculate about Google's direction when it comes to hardware. So it had a lot more to cover on the ground this year, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, we knew this has been leaked to death, that we were going to get this Pixel 3a and 3a XL. They're finally real. You can buy them today. They're on the Google Store.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah.
There's also a complete rebranding of the Google Home brand into Nest. And so now instead of a Google Home hub, it's called the Nest Hub.
It's actually Google Nest Hub Max.
Yeah, the product they launched, but the old one is now called Google Nest Hub.
Yeah, instead of Home Hub.
And so the Home is gone and it's replaced with Nest is really what it is.
Yeah. Which I have mixed feelings about.
I have a lot of mixed feelings about it as well.
Yeah.
So what else is there to talk about? We're going to cover a little bit of the I.O. keynote, cherry picking some things that I think are going to, if you're a phone user, especially on Android, are going to make your life really interesting, especially if you're a Pixel user. I think a lot of Pixel users are going to get those features first.
Yeah. They're all coming to
And
Pixel.
a lot of them were kind of eye-raising, but in this, I can see how they could do that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's intriguing, but yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like last year where we were totally mind blown by Duplex and then also scared. The amount of hit pieces that came out of Duplex last year was insane.
Yeah. So okay, look, you don't have a Pixel 3 as a phone you access on a regular basis. So I'm kind of curious as to how you feel about this 3A. And of course 3A XL is just a 3A in bigger format, but they're very, very identical.
Yeah, I mean, I used the 3XL for a few weeks after I got it. Actually, a few months. And it was I didn't really want to make it my secondary because the battery life was like horrible. And I really didn't like the notch, and it just kind of felt big. And like the screen is amazing, right? But like, the 4 gigabytes of RAM was not enough.
This is the vein of my existence as a daily driver Pixel 3 XL user, is after using all these other phones with 8, 10, 12 gigs of RAM now, I'm just like, I get the RAM. I used to laugh about it. I used to think, 4 was a bit limited. I thought 6 and 8 would be fine. But now that I've had 10 or 12, leave all the apps running. All of them permanently all the time.
Yeah, I just think the Pixel 3 XL is not a great phone because it's just like not enough RAM, the battery life is horrible, and that notch is like crazy. So the 3A actually looks relatively intriguing though, because you're not getting the notch, which is a big deal. You can get actually the bigger phone without the notch, which is kind of like what I wanted.
It reminds me a lot, actually, the big one of the Pixel 2 XL.
Yeah, kind of.
Right?
I was actually more reminisced about it. Kind of seemed like a Pixel 1 to me.
Yeah, but because of that 18:9 display.
Yeah.
To me, it's interesting because if you look at them from a distance, you're not really paying attention on a table, especially the black ones. To me, the 3A is kind of like a 3.
Yeah.
And the 3A XL is kind of like a 2 XL.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, with the size and the shape of the screen.
Right, true, because it's curved and stuff. Yeah.
So let's fire off, take turns firing off the specs real quick so people know what we're talking about. So $399 for the Pixel 3A with, what is it, 1080p display?
Yeah, it's 1080p.
5.6 inches. AMOLED or OLED.
Yeah.
18 by 9 with rounded corners, so there's a top and bottom bezel.
Yeah. There's bezels, but they're not a big deal for me. But it's got Snapdragon 670.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting. We should go back to that. And we mentioned 4 gigs of RAM. That remains. So that could be, for some people...
I think it's funny, actually. I think it's kind of funny that like their flagship has 4 gigs and then their mid-range also has 4 gigs.
Well, it tells you what you need to know about their flagship and how they should have really put 6 or 8 gigs last year.
Absolutely. It makes you realize it makes you know that Google realized that it was definitely not enough.
But they've done this before, and this is the thing I don't understand. In many ways, the Nexus 5 was like a really high point in this Google phone evolution. I had one. And I loved it primarily. The battery's life sucked, but the price, you couldn't beat the price.
Yeah, it was $300 or something.
It was
$299, I think. Yeah.
I feel like this Pixel 3 at $399 is kind of a return to form. But at the same time, the Nexus 5X that came out 2 generations after the 5
was a flagship.
Had 2 gigs of RAM at the time.
Yeah.
And even then, we were like, nope.
Yeah.
The Nexus 6P had 3 gigs at the time.
Yeah.
And that was comfortable.
Right.
But 2, we were all like screaming about it.
Yeah, it wasn't great at the time.
It seems like it kind of reminds me going really way back at Nokia in the Symbian days when they constantly under-rammed their phone. They had so little RAM on their phones, and their phones would always crash because there wasn't an OS that was able to kill an app and survive.
Yeah.
So the whole thing would reboot.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, what? Why just spend like an extra $20? This phone's at $600. Just give us a bit more RAM. So it's not going to be that bad, obviously, with 4 gigs on the Pixel 3a, but...
Yeah, it should be okay. I mean, like, the Snapdragon 670 is obviously a chip that's not going to push as many frames, and so it's going to save more battery, and you're probably just not going to want to do as much.
Well, you bring up something interesting. So the battery on the 3a is a 3,000 milliamp hour, and if you really think about this for a second, 3,000 milliamp plus a 1080p display versus Quad HD on the big pixels, the expensive pixels, and a Snapdragon 670, that's going to be, I really believe this thing is going to be at least a day of battery life. Yeah. Probably more.
I mean, if you think about it, OnePlus has been using 1080p displays forever, pretty much. And the OnePlus 6 had a 3,300 milliamp hour battery, and it still had really good battery life, and it was 1080p. So... And this is OLED, which means if you actually use apps that have OLED support, then you're going to get a lot more battery life. And if you use Android Q, they have system-wide dark mode now, which means you're going to actually save battery life there.
So I think it's going to be killer. Yeah. I think the battery life is what's going to surprise us for the first time in a long time.
I think it will be pretty good. Yeah.
Cameras, so you've got the 8 megapixel front camera. That's I looked, actually, it's not the same as either of the 8 megapixels on the 3 and 3 XL. It's in between the field of view. So the one in the Pixel 3 and 3 XL, there's 2, is a 70-something degrees and a 90-something degrees. This is an 80-something degrees.
This is like a forced relatively
wide. Like 84 degrees or something like that.
Yeah, so you're not getting the ultra-wide, but it's still decent.
But it's probably going to do great portraits, because we've seen that. I mean, on the Pixel 2, where they didn't have dual front cameras, portraits were great on the front selfies. So you're getting great selfies. And that's one of the things that I really honestly want to call I sometimes joke and call my Pixel the selfie phone or the portrait phone, because it does portraits so well. So speaking of, the main camera is identical to the big
that 12 megapixel pixel camera that everyone loves.
1.8 f1.8 12.2 megapixels. The bottom line is you're getting for $399 a phone that aesthetically looks a lot like a Pixel 3 and is significantly cheaper. And you're getting 90% of the Google experience, the camera experience, the Pixel experience, but you're also getting, I think you're going to get better battery life. And unless you're playing the latest, most hardcore games where the GPU really matters, I really don't think that day to day you're going to notice a performance difference. In fact, it'll be interesting to benchmark this, and I might eat my words, but I am going to call it now that the Pixel 3a is going to be faster on benchmarks because of the 1080p as well. Than the Pixel 2.
I could see that. Yeah.
I mean,
835.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it might be, because remember, if you look at the Qualcomm's, universe, the Snapdragon universe, you got the 845 that spawned the 710.
Yeah.
And then you've got the 855 that spawned the 730 that was just announced a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then you've got, if you look closer, the 710 spawned
The
670.
Yeah.
So, it's in that 845 lineage.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it might be faster and more efficient than the 835.
Yeah. Because it was a big jump to the 845. So.
And of course, it includes a lot of the imaging, ISP tricks that you need in hardware to do some of the things that Google Camera does.
Yeah.
A lot of people have already noticed because here's the thing. We all got a device today, but some, of course, reviewers had devices under embargo. And so some of the reviews are out today. So check that out. Check out my hands-on video on YouTube. And by the time this podcast is published, I'll have an unboxing video as well. But the bottom line is some people have already tested that and they've noticed that, the camera is not quite as fast. It's more like Pixel 2, where it did the processing for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But I don't think that people are going to care about that.
No, that's okay. I think it's the quality that matters. But...
And so a couple of more things about the Pixel 3a. Number one, it is a unibody polycarbonate plastic, but it looks really nice. It looks machined. It doesn't look molded to me. It looks really well done.
The plastic feels nice.
It's got that shiny top and kind of matte bottom that aesthetically matches the design of the bigger, more expensive ones. And then this is the thing that is absolutely making me super hyped about this phone. I know it's stupid, but headphone jack. This is the first manufacturer I can think of that has gone back on their word in a way.
Okay, but if you look at every mid-ranged phone out, they all have headphones.
A lot of them don't anymore.
Mid-ranged?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, let me think. I'm thinking Chinese phones, but even phones that are sold in the US, New Mobile and UU Mobile, I've got their G3 and G3 Plus $200 phones. All metal and aluminum sandwiches. Okay. MediaTek processors. Really nice phones. They compete with the G series from Moto.
Okay.
No headphone jack.
But think about mainline companies.
Well, the G series still has a headphone jack.
Yeah. Nokia offers headphone jacks on their mid-range line.
Trying to think. About $399, there's a few phones that don't have headphone jacks anymore. Well, okay, OnePlus. The 6T is not $399.
Yeah.
But it's
they don't really have a mid-range phone. That's considered their flagship.
Yeah, you're right. I'm trying to think of
because if you think Nokia has headphone jacks on their mid-range phones.
Yeah, for sure.
Samsung offers it on all their phones, but they also offer it on their mid-range option.
So the question is, I think we'd have to do some tallying to figure this one out. But I get this gut feeling to me that, for me, because this is the first time Google's making a mid-range, you're going to say it's a mid-range, that's why the headphone jack, and I acknowledge that. I don't think you're wrong. I feel, though, that they could have, by their philosophy of saying we've dropped the headphone jack, we're not going to put it back even on the mid-ranger.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's a smart decision that they did put it back. In a way, they're coming back.
But the thing is, they're not going to bring it back for the 4.
But the 4, I want to discuss the 4 with you. Okay. I have a lot of issues. It hasn't even been leaked or discussed I just have something to say about the 4. Okay. And I want to probe your thoughts on the 4. Because I'm pissed with Google and I'm not, that's kind of exaggerated. I am annoyed with what they did with the Pixel 3 and 3 XL. I feel that it feels so 2 years ago now. In May of 2019, it's aged very poorly.
Yeah, that's what, it's funny because when a lot of people are comparing devices and someone will say, oh, should I get the Pixel 3? A lot of people say, oh, that device is kind of old now. But it's it's not.
But it's not.
6 months.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
And this is why I want to talk about the 4 because
this
has been a pattern with Google.
Yeah.
And I want them to break it. At $399, I don't care what they do.
Right.
Almost. I feel that giving that Pixel experience, especially the camera and the software experience of a Pixel, at that price point is a win no matter how you cut it. But the Pixel 4 better step up the hardware game. This is not about the software, the experience. This is about the build quality, the materials, the fit and finish, the camera count, the display, all the stuff we're seeing on all these phones we're using now that are flagships, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of people tell me I reviewed the G8 for Geekspin and I, overall liked it, but I had some issues. And a lot of people were really mad at me for that. They're like, it's a great phone by any measure. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not good enough.
Yeah.
That phone has to carry the flagship, 4G flagship.
Right.
Flag for LG for a year.
Yeah.
Imagine what that phone going to be like in December or January next year.
Right. It's not gonna feel modern anymore.
And that's when, and whereas I can see somebody rocking an S10 Plus in March or February 2020 and be fine.
Yeah, it's actually crazy how fast these phones feel outdated, though, is the thing. You can use a OnePlus 6T and it feels a little bit old because it doesn't have the curved edges and it doesn't have a hole punch, and that phone is 6 months old.
I know. We're going
crazy.
we're going through an interesting phase right now. So that's also part of one of the reasons I think I want to see them step up their game.
Yeah.
So going from the Pixel 3a to the 3a XL, what are we gaining? What are we losing? We're not losing anything.
Okay, well, I also wanted to note that neither of these phones have wireless charging.
True. They do have the squeeze feature though, which I thought was weird.
Edge sets, yes, which
it.
I think is awesome.
I never use that. Turn it off. It drives me nuts.
I used to use it on the 2 all the time.
I turn it off.
And then it also doesn't have water resistance.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
None of any kind.
I think it's 53.
Okay, well, it's better than nothing.
So it's like Splash, but
Splash.
Yeah. So you're also losing those. And I think that's interesting because you actually are dropping quite a bit. But what's interesting to me is the general reaction of people seem to be that those are not the things they really care about. And my point of view is that what Google's trying to do is they knew that Pixel 3 sales were not doing well and were not really going to do well. So they thought if we can get people into the Pixel ecosystem, because everyone, even general consumers, know that Pixel has the best camera, right? That's like what Google pushes the most. So Google figures if they can get people into the ecosystem with a cheaper device, then maybe once Pixel 4 or Pixel 5 rolls around, then they're going to want to upgrade to like a better phone. But they're already in the ecosystem. And when people get on a brand, they stick with that brand. Like that's why everyone's been on an iPhone since like the iPhone 3G. That's why people that know Samsung phones have been on Samsung phones since like the S2. Like they just don't move.
But does the Pixel brand really have that equity?
It's not the brand, but it's the camera. But people
camera,
know that the camera is really good. And so if they get in at a lower price, because they can walk into any carrier store now. They can see
it's on all 4 carriers.
It's on all the carriers. They can walk into the carrier store.
No, not AT&T though.
Oh, not AT&T?
It wasn't listed on there. It was US Cellular, I think.
Okay. But they can walk into a bunch of carrier stores, and there can be a representative that's like, "Oh, have you heard about the Pixel camera?" And
that's never gonna happen, David.
I don't know.
I don't want to be pessimistic,
okay, not a sales associate because they make money off of selling more expensive phones. But I mean, I don't know. I have friends who like know nothing about phones, and they're like, "Oh, is that the new Pixel?" And all they know about it is the camera.
Yeah.
And so if you can get those people in the ecosystem and they realize how good the camera is, then like maybe later down the line when they want to do an upgrade and they have more money, they can actually buy a Pixel 4 or Pixel 5.
It's interesting because that touches on pixel marketing, which is a big question mark for a lot of us media. We always scratch our heads and go, why isn't Google spending more money on marketing or putting...
They spend a lot of money on the Team Pixel initiative, which is all about the camera.
So I talked to Rick Osterloh today.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying his last name 100% right, but he's the head of hardware at Google.
Yeah.
And he had something really interesting to say about that. He says, it's a matter of balancing. If you push the marketing really hard and the sales are needed and we can't produce fast enough, that's one of the challenges. So we try to make sure that we can ramp up the production because he says, we're not like, it's not like Samsung where we know from past experience that we're going to make this many of them and stuff. So, I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the general feeling I got was that his answer about the marketing was that they're trying to be, they don't want to be in that situation where, there's tons of marketing and lots of high demand and then people can't get the phones.
Yeah.
And that seems pretty logical to me.
I mean, high demand means that there's more hype, so that's probably a better situation to be in than making way too many phones and not being able to sell them.
And that's exactly
like
what
HTC
I think
or
that's
something.
exactly what he was saying.
Yeah.
So I think so the 3A XL instead of a 5.6-inch display has a 6-inch display, and instead of a 3,000 milliamp battery, it has a 3,700.
Yeah, which is a pretty big jump.
Pretty big jump.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think
and no notch.
Yeah, and
I like that.
in other ways they're completely identical. Oh, another thing we didn't mention: both have stereo speakers, but they're not front facing for the bottom speaker. The bottom speaker is bottom firing, and then top speakers front facing.
Yeah, also
but
the
it's still
headphone jack
stereo.
comes out of the top for you guys that are runners.
Yeah, for those of
So.
you who care about this kind of stuff.
Some people really care about the positioning of
I
the
know they
headphone
do.
jack.
But I'm making fun of them at the same time as acknowledging that they care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, I don't know.
It's like a workout / runners thing. A lot of people want their phone
I have
to be-
lived with both, and I really don't think it matters very much.
Yeah, it's not a big deal to me. I don't care if my phone's upside down.
I have a rule that I only run when chased by big monsters. That's basically like very rarely happens in my life. But you know, I do like other things. I love not running, but the equivalent of running
Yeah.
in water, which is swimming. I love swimming.
I do have to bring up that someone from India hit me up today, and the pricing in India is actually not nearly as competitive.
It's not.
No.
Well, no, but that's the thing. That's actually, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because to me, I feel that $399 is too high. And a lot of people are like, Miriam, it's a Pixel experience with the Pixel camera. It's 90% of a Pixel 3. And I'm like, but you don't understand. In a big chunk of the world, you know, you can get a glass and metal, not plastic, but glass and metal phone with better specs than this dual cameras in the rear. Like here's an example: Honor 8X.
Yeah.
For $250.
Right.
It's literally $150 less.
Yeah.
But I know it's not Pixel. I know it's not going to get the updates. I know the camera doesn't have the AI and the machine learning and the features. It's not the hardware that makes the camera so special on the Pixel.
It's the software.
It's the software.
Yeah.
So you're paying for the software, you're paying for the Google experience, you're paying for the Pixel experience, you're paying for the updates. You're going to get, I mean, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about later, features that they announced at I/O in the keynote, are only coming to Pixel first, and then eventually probably spreading to probably the next letter after Q.
Yeah. So something that is kind of nice is if you buy it at Best Buy, you get a $100 Best Buy gift card. So kind of, it's not $100 off, but at least you get a $100 gift card. And then if you buy it at the Google store, you also get a $100 Google gift card. Which is nice.
That's right.
But in India, the pricing is equivalent to $550 for the cheapest one.
Wow.
And in India, where people like OnePlus are like gaining popularity like crazy, Realme is extremely popular there, releasing like flagship phones for $300. No one in India is going to want to buy this phone, and that sucks because like that's their next big market. Like India is the next big market, and if Google can't sell phones there, then like they're not going to do well overall.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is definitely an issue. I think that I just feel like in my ideal world, now that I've played with the phone and used it, I think I'd be happier if this phone was $349.
Yeah.
And
that would be a true return to the Nexus 5.
I feel that the 3A XL should be $400.
Yeah.
Because it's $70 difference.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how you can pay $70 more for a slightly bigger display and a slightly bigger battery. That's the only difference. Yeah. So like $50 I can kind of see, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
but the reality is these prices are going to drop. I'm pretty sure that we're going to see sales. And so, you know, as such, I'm like, okay, maybe I should calm down. But I've had this conversation with Ben Sin from Hong Kong last week on the show. You know, he's like, I don't understand your pricing. We were talking about the Moto G7 and G7 Power. I just reviewed the G7 Power on Geekspin. Geekspin.co. Go check out my review. I'll put it in the notes. The G7 Power is in $250 is list. It's retail, like street is already lower than that, so in the $200 range. But he's like, that's insane for this phone. I'm like, that would be a $150 phone in China. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I'm like, he says, I don't understand your pricing in the US. And I'm like, well, it's about, you know, you get a better software experience than you'd get on a Xiaomi or on an Oppo or a Vivo, especially a Vivo. And he's like, yeah, but I'm like, well, with Moto, you're getting almost pure Android. Like it does make a difference. He's like, but it's you know, why do you pay more for a simpler software experience in a way that doesn't make sense?
Yeah.
So I think
They're
it's
just
interesting.
Totally different markets.
It's just totally different. So that leads to the next question, which is, do you think that, I mean, obviously they're targeting India, but do you think that maybe Google is focusing more on the US and Europe on this phone, saying like, we are not doing well at the high end, but we can bring a lot of this because it's software to the mid-range and we get that experience at 90%.
Yeah.
And people will pay a little premium for this because they're in the West.
I think, again, it's going back to the trying to get people into the ecosystem and getting them hyped on the camera and staying with it. Because, like, I think if they were actually trying to target India, they would have priced it a lot more competitively there. Yeah. But in the US, like, they really know that people are not really buying the Pixel phones. And, like, the Pixel 3 had really terrible sales in the US, even though they actually did a lot more marketing about Pixel 3 than they've done for pretty much any of their other phones. Mm-hmm. So they probably spent a ton of marketing and just didn't sell that many devices. So, yeah, I mean, the pricing in the US is definitely better than it is anywhere else, even though it's not great still. $400 is still kind of a lot of money for the cheapest option that they offer. And these are also both 64 gigabyte phones. They don't offer anything with more storage. Right. Storage. And there's no expandable storage either.
It's only 64.
And 64 is a little...
It's iffy. It's what I consider to be minimum today. Yeah. So it's interesting, by the way. So I also feel that in my ideal universe, if I was running the world, I guess, the Pixel 3 would be, I said, $350 instead of $399.
Yeah, like $349.
And it would be glass, and it would be metal and glass. Yeah. It wouldn't necessarily have wireless charging or anything. It would just be, because I know that, every Chinese maker can make a... Yeah, even the freaking Moto G... Not the G7 this year, but because it's gone back to a plastic frame with a glass back. Yeah. But the Moto G6 last year. Mm-hmm. And remember the X4?
Yeah, the X4
like
was
glass
nice.
Sandwich.
And was that $249?
Yeah.
$299?
Well, $299. And the G6 last year was $250. Yeah. So if Moto can do it in the US, that's kind of a hard sell for me. Like that's why I'm like, I get it. The profit margin, I think, on this phone is actually really good.
I think maybe what they're trying to do is, like, there was this quote from, maybe it was Rick Osterle, I don't remember what, but it was Pixel stays premium.
But plastic isn't premium.
Well, they said that a couple of years ago, but even though this isn't a quote-unquote premium phone, Google is still valuing their software experience as a premium experience.
And I agree with that.
Right, so you pay the little, like you said, you pay the little extra to get that Google software.
That brings us back to the flaws of the original 3 and 3 XL, the fact that the hardware is just not good enough for that category of phone. And it brings us back to what's going to happen with the 4. Because in the mid-range, you can kind of get away with the hardware just being a window to your software experience, like the very Apple-y concept of the phone doesn't matter. It's just a window into what our experience, our silo, our stuff is. And I get that.
I felt like that's what the Pixel 1 was.
The Pixel 1 was very much that.
Yeah.
But to me, the Pixel 3 is the next one that feels like that. And that worries me about the 4. Because I'm like, look, I want freaking hardware. I want you to pull out the big guns. I want a tele, a wide, and a regular in the back with that software that you make.
Yeah.
And I want no compromise. Yeah. And I want, metal, glass. I want everything you've done so far. I know you're not going to bring back the headphone jack, but I want 8 gigs or 10 gigs of RAM. Like, don't F around here, Google, okay?
They're going to do 6.
Well, but that's not good enough. And that's my concern. It's like, I'm like, if you want to, and maybe there won't be a Pixel 4. Maybe the next Pixel is just going to stay mid-range, and that's where they're going to stay. I mean, it was like that in a way for the Nexus 5. The Nexus 5 was a very mid-range phone for its time. It had flagship specs, but, kind of barely.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to go back to mid-range.
Well, then, if you're listening, Google, hopefully somebody's listening, please, 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 we need something that is like, checks all the flagship boxes.
You know what I read today, though, is that the 3A was the first device that was wholly designed by the HTC team that was acquired by Google. So it's possible that the 4 is a lot better.
Well, I mean, it's for me, it has to last an entire year at least and be viable.
Yeah.
It's like 2 years is much, but a year, the 3A will be fine in 2 years.
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah.
But if you're a flagship buyer, the reality is North America, people walk into a carrier store and they buy a phone from carrier on subsidy.
Yeah.
And most people, I would say people who will, buy a Pixel and a higher end Pixel will know more about this stuff and are probably updating it once a year. Mm-hmm. Not twice, not with their contract. They're actually on another cycle.
Yeah.
And because of that, you need to give them a phone like, as we said earlier, the 3XL and the 3 just don't feel like we can recommend them right now. It's only been 6 months.
I definitely
In fact, right
cannot
now, if I had to
recommend
recommend a Pixel to anyone, I'd say buy the 3A.
Yeah.
Call it a day, because you get 90% of the experience and you save money.
Yeah.
And you can buy another 4A next year. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
and if they make a 4A and
Yeah.
get that experience, I don't know. It's really interesting. I'm excited. I'm stoked. I love the purple, the purplish, which is very slightly purple.
It's like a lilac.
Kind of like the pinkish was.
It's like a light lilac.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice.
And it's got that nice little green button on it for power.
Yeah.
It's
like a
and then it's got an orange button on the white one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then does the black one have a black button?
Yeah.
I haven't seen the. I mean, I barely saw the black one.
It's just black on black.
It's so boring.
Yeah.
Who buys black phones?
I used to.
No, I mean, I shouldn't judge. People can do whatever they want. That's just a matter of taste. I just feel like I just find black phones kind of boring.
Yeah. I mean, everyone uses a case anyway.
And that's the thing, right? That's probably why you're going to say, who cares if it's plastic? Well, then why don't we go back to phones that are like, the crappy plastic chrome like Samsung did forever on the flagships?
Oh, gosh.
Like Galaxy S3, S4, S5.
I loved that at the time, but not anymore.
All I could do at the time as a reviewer was look at it and like, you see the mold lines on it, and you're like, "Oh my god, it's so cheap! This phone is so expensive, and your materials are crap." Yeah. Remember the Band-Aid looking S5?
Yeah,
that weird pink color.
Horrible.
That looked like a Band-Aid.
Oh my
gosh. Oh my god. Yeah. I'm so glad we're far from that. I mean, and that's the thing. Like the G Power. Go back to Moto. The G7 Power I reviewed is plastic frame and fake glass back. By that I mean it's a plastic back that's made to look like glass.
Yeah.
And it looks way more premium than what Samsung was doing with the S3, S4, S5.
Yeah.
So it's possible. And again, the 3A looks really, really nice. Like unless you're side by side touching them,
you don't actually
really know the difference.
Yeah, seriously.
And so maybe you're right. Maybe it is. That's why it's premium.
I think it's Google is just trying to keep the software experience valued higher. They want consumers to pay for the Pixel brand just like people pay for the Apple brand.
I don't think they're in a position to do that quite yet.
They're not, but they want to be, and they think they are.
But they're not working very hard for that. I don't feel like the push has been there. Like, they talk about the push. Every Pixel we get, the 1, the 2, the 3, and now the 3A, it's like our experience, us, our brand, our identity.
I think every headline...
And I'm like, where the hell is the money that goes behind the marketing, behind the production numbers to justify this?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we want to see the sales first. I mean, it's a chicken and egg here. You guys...
I think Google has not gotten out of the position where it's mostly Android enthusiasts who are interested in the Pixel, and because of that, they do a lot of sales at the beginning, and they just don't follow through.
Do you think we're doing them a disservice by being mostly tech journalists with the Pixels? Because I feel like we're at I/O today, right? And like, who was it that was saying like, we're all getting a phone, we don't really need it. Like, I mean, obviously we wanted to review it, but do we really need a Pixel when 90% of the people in the audience had a Pixel?
Yeah.
Already, that probably daily drive, and then half of them were on 5. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's good for us because it's good for us to be able to experience what Google can do with their software on mid-range hardware.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually really seriously thinking of switching from the so I got a purplish 3A.
Yeah.
I chose the smaller one on purpose. I'm thinking of switching from my 3XL.
You should.
Just to kind of to live the
$399
the $399 pixel dream life.
Yeah.
Because also the headphone jack. I have a bunch of Google headphone adapters in my various vehicles that don't have Bluetooth.
Yeah.
My old cars that are behind the seats under the car. I don't know where they are because I keep losing them. And this phone, I'm just going to be able to plug right in. It's going to be great. I don't know. I think it's cool. Yeah. I'm excited. It looks really good.
Yep.
And we'll let you know once we've played with it for a while.
Yeah,
although you can also read the reviews that are out from some of the publications today.
We have a review out, actually.
Yeah, well, there you go. Android Authority has a review.
I have a hands-on video, but I didn't get a lot of time with it. But we do have a full review because our India guy got a lot of time with it.
Ah, cool. Yeah. So what do you think of like things like battery life and performance and stuff that we cannot, share unless we try the phone for a while?
I think battery life's going to be good.
Okay.
I think especially the XL is going to be really good.
But is that what he said in his review?
Oh, what did he say?
Yeah.
I didn't read it yet.
It
went out this morning.
You haven't had time. I haven't had time to read anything. I just know these reviews are there.
He published it this morning.
I will link to it in the show notes, so check it out.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. I'll talk about the Pixel 4 a little bit. Look, I think I kind of already said it. The concern I have is that we're gonna, in that philosophy of like our experience, our premiumness is in the software. They're not going to give us. I didn't feel like the 3 and 3 XL hardware really hit that price point properly. I felt like, and I kind of feel that way about 3 as well. I feel like you're paying for and that's good, but we live in a world where OnePlus exists, okay?
Yeah.
And you can see the software experience they bring to the table. And yes, the camera experience is not quite there yet, but they're getting better all the time. And their software experience is damn close to a Pixel experience.
You know what I have to say is, like, after you're reviewing the S10 Plus and the Huawei P30 Pro, having the versatility of 3 lenses of different focal lengths is like, I can't go back. It's actually so convenient.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because I really don't think Google's going to offer 3 cameras in the back because they've been so gung-ho about look what we can do with 1. They might go to 2. But they
surprised us with 2 cameras in the front. I was not expecting that at all.
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't see them doing 3 in the back just because I feel like they're so gung-ho about it. I don't know. They might do some cool thing where they have like optical zoom or something. I don't know, but it's hard because I love having that versatility, and every time I review a phone that has 3 cameras on the back, I'm like, this versatility is freaking amazing. I don't care about the quality that much, just the ability to be able to do a 3x, a 5x zoom, and suddenly it's clear. Like the Huawei P30 Pro, like that 10x hybrid zoom is freaking insane.
It's insane.
And so, yeah, I as much as Google has amazing processing and color reproduction and stuff, like unless they can actually get that optical quality for like a wide and a telephoto, it's kind of hard to be able to like recommend them.
And that is my perspective. Like, you see, I'm thinking that Google needs to do with the Pixel 4 what OnePlus looks like they're doing from what we know so far, the rumors on a OnePlus 7 Pro,
which is cameras.
No holds barred hardware.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a few things we know they're not going to have the IP rating, and I'm not sure about wireless charging, but I doubt it's going to have it. Yeah. So my point is that if Google, imagine what Google could do if the camera system on the back of the Pixel was the sensors and lenses we see on the
48 megapixel
P30 Pro.
Yeah.
Imagine if you combined that Leica imaging experience hardware with Google software. Because look, Huawei has some good AI chops, but they don't have nearly as good AI chops as Google. Number one,
no one does.
And no one does, especially on the computational photography and machine learning there. But it's also because, for good machine learning, you need good data. And Google has all the pictures in the world, right?
All the data, yeah.
So to me, that's kind of where I'm going with this Pixel 4. I'm like, you have no reason. And I would say that in the same way as it looks like OnePlus is going higher price point and more premium and more flagship, in a way, freeing themselves from that limitation of making a $600 phone with the Pro. At least that's all the indications we're getting. I kind of want Google to go that way. Now that they have the 3A, $399, why don't you give us a $1,000 flagship, Google, and like show us what you can do? Because I will spend that money. And there's a ton of people in Silicon Valley and in the West, in this economy of plentiful, that are going to spend that kind of money. Because right now they're buying iPhone 10X Maxes because they want that kind of hardware. They're buying Galaxy S10 Pluses because they want that kind of hardware. And they know your Google experience is great and your camera is great. But they're like, I don't want to sacrifice on these other things like reverse wireless charging, headphone jack, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm worried. I'm worried about the Pixel 4. I'm worried that they are kind of stuck in this kind of, like, it feels to me like this is the problem with Silicon Valley. It's like they're so stuck in their little bubble, they don't see the world out there.
I know.
And Samsung might be making some horrible, stupid mistakes like the Fold, I mean, the fold itself is not a mistake. The way that they brought it to us so far has been a mistake. But like in the way that they're clumsy doing some other stuff, I feel like Google is really clumsy in not recognizing that, like it's kind of like the fit and finish in a Tesla, right?
Yeah.
It could be Audi-like, but it's not. And this is coming from me who owns one. It's like, why couldn't you do that, Tesla, right? Like, it would be even better.
Right.
Like, but it's the experience. Oh, sake, it's like the experience is great, but it's not just about the experience.
If you really want to just like have no reason to buy the other car, then you gotta like just make it just as good.
In the car enthusiast world right now, that's the big debate that's going on. It's like we know that eventually the other brands are gonna
catch up,
not catch up necessarily, but compete.
Yeah.
And then what? Like then people are gonna buy Mercedes and Audi and Porsche
if they're
because
electric and
they can get all that good stuff, almost all that good stuff from Tesla.
Right.
It's the same as a Galaxy S10 versus a Google.
Actually, I think that's a pretty apt comparison because Tesla's the one that has the insane self-driving capabilities that no one else has. And they have more data than anyone else, so they're kind of the Google of the car world.
It's totally that.
Yeah.
And I think when you compare it, it's like, well, do I buy the Galaxy S10 Plus? That's like the BMW or the Audi or the Porsche, or do I buy the Tesla, which is the Google one?
Yeah.
And it's like, I always feel like this. I've been reviewing phones since the early 2000s, and I feel that every year we're so close to the Holy Grail, and that there's always one thing dropped of one of the phones that just makes it that we can't have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
It's like, how is this possible that almost 20 years have gone by, at least 10 years of smartphone 12 years of smartphone have gone by if you go by the iPhone launch, and we still can't get like everything.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting that Google would do that, because I don't expect Google to bring us everything.
No, I don't either.
But at the same time, I want them to bring us way more than what they brought us so far.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm excited. But speaking of hardware, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that was announced. Yes. And in terms of hardware, the rebranding of the Nest, the Google Home brand to the Google Nest brand.
Yeah.
And then we had the Google Home Hub, and now it's called the Nest. Google Nest Hub, or just Nest Hub. And then now we have a bigger Nest Hub called the Nest Hub Max.
Yeah,
which is a mouthful. Try to say that 5 times really quick.
Google Nest Hub Max, Google Nest.
Forget it.
Yeah, anyway.
It's not going to happen.
So this is kind of weird because it's almost a merge between a Nest Cam, a Google Home Max, and a Google Home Hub. It's like It's like 3 products in one, because they didn't just make it bigger; they actually made the speakers better too. They added
stereo.
two tweeters on the front and one on the back, and it's really loud and it sounds really good. And it's pretty much 3 products in one.
What's the display size? That's the one thing I never caught on any spec.
Big.
Yeah.
It is 10 inches
versus something like 7 inches before, right?
Yeah.
And so you can feel it. But it's funny, when you see it in isolation, it doesn't look that much bigger. But then when you see them side by side, you're like, holy crap.
Well, I remember my first reaction at the Made by Google event in October, when we actually saw the Google Home Hub in person, I was like, oh, this is insanely small. Because in all the videos and animations and stuff, it looked
so much bigger.
Well, you don't know how big it is. And then we saw it on the walls, on the display walls, and we were like, oh, this is why it's like $99. Like, it's super small. But yeah, the new one is it's interesting. I like...
So they have a camera on it.
Yeah.
And it allows all kinds of really interesting things. For example, it has
it's a Facebook portal, basically.
Yeah, so it supports... So now, number one thing it supports is it can become a Nest camera itself. Number 2 thing it supports is it can be used for dual calls.
Yeah, and it'll track you around the room.
And it does, but it does it. It's a software.
It's software crop,
software cropping. And then the third thing it can do is it recognizes gestures. So if the music's playing, you want to mute it. Basically, you just put your hand in front of it, like stop.
And it recognizes your face.
And it recognizes face, so it can switch profiles and give you your personalized stuff based on your face,
which is awesome.
And then there's more. There's more. I'm trying to remember. There were a whole bunch of things that use the vision stuff.
It can do a lot.
But here's the cool thing: that I think is really cool. There's a physical hardware switch on the back, just like on the original, that doesn't just turn off the mic, but actually physically turns off the camera.
Yeah, so people that are worried about like...
You can also in software toggle the camera and the microphone on and off.
Yeah.
But if you want to completely have privacy, no mic, no camera, just reach in the back, turn off the switch.
Yeah, and then there was that whole thing where you could just say stop instead of hey G, stop.
Yeah, right. So that's actually a feature that's rolling out across a bunch of...
Yeah, but that's just all of them. Nice
but basically, you know, if you're listening to music, you can just say... Instead of saying, hey, you know, I'm not going to say the keyword.
Yeah.
But instead of saying the keyword, you can just go ahead and say stop.
Yeah.
So other things it does is it's got a bigger screen, so it's much more fun for YouTube videos and watching TV. Sounds better, stereo sound.
This kind of feels like their finally true competition of like the Lenovo Smart Display.
Yeah.
Because they never really had a true competitor.
Did Lenovo have a camera?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And they advertised the fact that you could make video calls on it.
Oh.
But yeah, but like this is kind of their true competitor, but it's just better because it's also a Nest hub. Yeah.
Totally. You know what I love though is that you can turn it into a Nest camera.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Of course you do that. And you think about the cost of a Nest camera and you're like, why would I put that in every room and then you get much more use out of it.
These things are kind of big and I think they're expecting you to get like one and then putting the small ones in like bedrooms and stuff. I think they're expecting you to get one and put it in like your kitchen or your living room.
So it's $229.
Yeah, which is actually not horrible.
Which is kind of amazingly cheap, honestly, for what you're getting.
The sound quality you're getting is really good.
You're getting a TV. Yeah. You're getting a stereo.
Yeah.
You're getting an S camera.
Yeah.
And you're getting a basic communication device like a Skype, you know, Duo or whatever.
Yeah, and a really good smart speaker too.
Yeah. So I think it's cool.
Yeah. What was the HomePod at launch? Like $300?
Oh my God! Yeah.
$350? I think it was
$350.
And so this is a lot less. It has better functionality. It has way more functionality.
And it has the best assistant on the planet, bar none. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, you know, for me, it's like Siri and Alexa, why? You know, I don't get what I want out of them. No, they're not going to help me. So they don't know what I do. They don't know my life. Yeah. And I know that's a dangerous thing because it's a double-edged sword, right? Like Google knows so much about my life, and then it could be very dangerous. But
these are cool though. I don't know how I feel about them rebranding Google Home into Nest.
I don't like it.
I don't think that consumers are going to like that.
I think Nest made sense for the camera system before it was bought by Google because it felt like, you know, it's my Nest. It's secure and safe.
Well, it made sense for like thermostat and stuff.
Keeps warm, right? Yeah. And the cameras keeps me safe.
Yeah.
But this is now much more, to me, it's such a much more universal.
Device. Yeah.
Nest doesn't feel quite right for that.
No, I like the Google Home branding. And now Google Home app, are they going to blend everything into the Nest tab? Like, this sounds horrible.
Yeah, that will be a nightmare.
So I don't know. We'll figure that out in the next few months.
And then they have the doorbells as well under the Nest brand.
Yeah.
But I mean, basically what it's saying is that Pixel is the phone brand, Nest is now the speaker display, hardware.
I don't like that,
home automation brand.
I don't like it.
No, I don't like it either.
Yeah.
But you just have to live with it. That's going to be a nightmare, but it's going to be what it is.
Yeah.
Because look, the reality is like, if you run into a complete stranger on the street and you say, have you heard of the Nest Hub Max? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Whereas if you say, you know, have you heard of the Google Home Max or Hub or whatever, they're going to say, no, but Google Home, isn't that their speaker?
Yeah,
and
people know
like,
what that is.
You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, think about it. There's so much, it's been Echo, you know, the dot, the little one, versus Google Home Mini, right?
Yeah.
For how long now?
For like
they are they're almost $5 a pop now on sale. Like you know, they've gotten to a point where like you can
every Christmas they just throw those minis
buy
around.
like 50 of them,
and
just mount them anywhere you want. And I feel like by rebranding now, they're really potentially like giving a lot of advantages to Amazon, right? Because Amazon, I think their branding is great. I think Echo is a really good brand.
Well, the thing is, like, everyone owns a Google Home Mini now, right? So it's like, what are they going to call it? Like Nest Home Mini? Or
I guess
Google Nest Mini.
I don't know.
Speaker. Like, it's weird.
I know, and I mean, you look at Amazon. They didn't change the word. They didn't call.
No.
They didn't consolidate everything under the Ring brand when they acquired the Ring doorbell.
Echo is
their brand,
even
and
though
Ring
everyone
is their
just calls
brand
it
too.
the Alexa. It's still Echo.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm torn by all this. I feel like basically.
I like the product. I don't like the branding.
Yeah, I think the product's going to be great.
The product's stellar in my opinion.
I'm going to look forward to getting a review of that, I tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So there's a bunch of other news that was announced at the keynote, and I'm going to dig into that now. The biggest thing for me that stood out.
Okay, let's talk about our picks.
Mine was all the Google Assistant features. The fact that Google Assistant will now run on device.
That was also one of mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me actually bring up my stuff on that, because I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
They basically demoed much faster because you don't have to be online.
Right.
So the voice recognition model on Android Q is actually baked in device. You don't need to.
It's 500 megabytes.
It's actually down to 80, I think. I thought they said 80.
Oh, did they?
But yeah.
Oh.
No, I'm not talking about the assistant part.
Isn't the entire English language is in 80 megabytes?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then the entire model is 500.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that now we have basically this crazy fast response for the assistant.
It's super quick. They demoed it on stage and it's great.
And it's coming to Q and the Pixels first, of course. Yeah. So that's it's always like that.
And I mean, the fact that you can use it offline is amazing. Like, the fact that you don't have to wait. It's kind of like the comparison between the Pixel 1 and the Pixel 2's camera. How the Pixel 1, and actually even before the Pixel 1, when HDR Plus was introduced with the Nexus 6, how you would hit the shutter button and it would just be processing. That was HDR, right?
Yeah.
Now we have that for, obviously for portrait mode, but it's kind of the same thing. With Assistant, you would say, "Hey G," and it would build bing, and then you would ask it the question, and it would kind of render, and then then it would do your thing. But on stage, then it was just like, "Hey G, do this."
And also, the example they showed, you can continue talking.
Yeah.
Like, while you have their attention,
right,
you're good to go for a while.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing. It's very conversational.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of blew my mind was, how low latency it was, and how they've integrated it into the status bar on the Pixel at the bottom.
Yeah,
right?
I love how it shows
down there all the time.
It.
Yeah, you can see. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Another thing they talked about was how with Lens now, you'll be able to translate right in Lens.
Yeah.
So if you point Lens you don't have to fire up the Translate app and go into that camera mode of the Translate app to translate. You can fire up Lens, point it at a foreign language sign, and it'll figure it out and give you a translation.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, not quite related to Assistant. Also, kind of in the whole AI realm, Duplex, which you saw last year, which I use now with my screen calling on my Pixel all the time.
Yeah. When I had a Pixel, I used that all the
time. It now is coming to fill out web forms. So imagine you want to, the example on stage was you want to rent a car.
Yeah.
And, imagine instead of going through the drudge of filling out the form,
it'll fill it for you.
It uses AI to figure it out, knowing your web browser data. And it's basically the same as Duplex talking to a human on a phone, but doing it by reading a web page and interacting with it.
Yeah.
Based on what you tell it to do verbally.
Just like
you
saving
say,
so much time.
Rent me a mid-sized car on Hertz that from July 12th to July 15th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it'll do it.
Yeah.
Go to the Hertz website and do it.
Yeah,
it's
tons
freaking crazy.
Saving a ton of time, basically.
So that's some of the other stuff we saw. There was some Android Q specifics. Oh, there was driving mode for Google Assistant.
That's nice.
So it's a dedicated driving mode that basically has an interface optimized. Like you can activate by voice. You can say, "Hey G, put me in driving mode. Let's drive now," and it'll just switch the UI.
Which I think it's awesome because last week I went and saw the Polestar 2, which is the first car with Android Automotive, which is Android baked into the car instead of having Android Auto, which is just a stream
Right,
of your
right.
device. It's actually built into the system. And Google is working with a bunch of developers to make a Android Automotive version of their app, because if you think about it, driving is actually the situation in which using these entertainment apps is actually like the most useful, because driving is one of the most boring things you can do, and that's when you really want to be able to interact with music. You want to be able to make phone calls, you want to be able to text with your voice, and so you kind of need a different interface to make this easier to use without having to get distracted on the road. And so even Spotify was like one of the first ones to do it on the phone. There's a driving mode on Spotify where the buttons are huge. The skip button is huge. The pause play button is huge. And so kind of adding this mode for, in general, like driving mode for Android in general, I think is a really, really big play, because a lot of people mount their phones to the dashboard. And so being able to use the assistant just with your phone mounted to the dashboard and touch things with big buttons is just super useful.
No, it's great. I think that I'm excited because, I on my Tesla, obviously, I've got a big screen and it's easy to use. But in my older cars, I sometimes like to use, the Google Assistant. But the interface, like the car interface right now, is kind of like it breaks away from the assistant.
Yeah.
This is kind of merging the two.
Yeah.
And this brings up actually a product that I unboxed called the revamp.
I did a
by
brief for that too.
Anchor. by Anchor.
Yeah.
They sent me one.
Yeah.
And
was yours buggy?
I had issues, but they've replaced it with one that fixed the problems for me.
My review unit was really buggy.
So it's still not out, so it's very early on, but I'll put an unboxing video link in the show notes. The reason for, eventually I'll review it in more in depth in a video. I love the fact that it's a cigarette lighter 12 volt style adapter that looks just like a charger with two USB high speed fast charge ports on it. It just looks like that, but it also has a Google Assistant button.
And a Google Assistant button.
Couple of far-field mics and some LEDs on it.
Yeah.
And an aux out.
Yeah.
And so you're going to say, what? Well, so think about this. Even if you don't even get into the better functionality of it, it has Bluetooth in it. So for an old car, it means your phone connects to that gizmo via Bluetooth, and the output of the aux goes into your old stereo aux.
Right.
Or
Bluetooth.
You can charge your phone and another device in all-in-one device.
And
the fact that it's all-in-one
it's a far-field microphone
is amazing.
That makes interacting with the assistant a lot easier. It's actually really cool,
So that's the part. So then imagine all that. Imagine making calls to the good far-field microphones, but now add Google Assistant to the equation.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the Rove Bolt from Anchor does.
Right.
So they basically, it's like a Nest Mini, Google Home Mini, Google Nest Mini for your car.
Yeah.
And it also works on newer cars that don't have an aux because it does relay Bluetooth.
It can do Bluetooth
to Bluetooth. Yeah. But for $50, which is kind of expensive, but at the same time, it's not too bad when you consider the functionality it adds to an old car. And for me, it really made it obvious. I took it camping with me to Washington State a couple of weeks back for Easter in the camper van. And all of a sudden, my camper van felt like
a newer car.
A modern car. Like I could talk to it. And it felt like the fact that because I have multiple phones on me that react to the key phrase. I just pushed the button instead on the thing to trigger it. And then far field mics, it worked really well, even like 60 miles an hour on the freeway. And the sound quality is really nice because it supports aptX and stuff, and it comes out of the aux, and my stereo is okay. It just doesn't have Bluetooth. So that's a cool little gadget. Speaking of assistant, another thing that I thought was really cool during the keynote, going back to I/O again, is the incognito mode. So we're all familiar with incognito mode in Chrome, private mode or whatever, private browsing in general, and all web browsers have an option to do that. Doesn't track you, doesn't use anything. You pretty much, nobody will know what you did on that tab. And now they're going to introduce incognito to Google Search. And what I think is even cooler is Google Maps. So you'll be able to, in Maps, where at any point in time, just say, okay, stop tracking me now. And, this is where you bury that body and you rob that bank or whatever, right? And then you turn it back on.
This is where the couples that have location data on each other all the time are going to use incognito to disappear for a little bit.
It's going to be bizarre. But I mean, look, the reality is I think it's needed. There are some times when you just can't reveal your position for whatever reason. And same way, you don't want to reveal your search. You're embarrassed maybe because you're searching for something personal that you don't want to appear in your web search. So I like that the option exists. It enhances our user experience. So we talked about some of the Android Q features. But I want to talk about some. You talked about dark mode. We talked about the assistant being in device and voice recognition in device. There's a bunch of other stuff.
There's new navigation gestures that are pretty much like the iPhone 10.
Finally,
yeah.
Oh, I hate the pill. I can't deal with the pill.
Freaking terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. They have some new privacy and security settings that are very similar to what we see on iPhone on a per app basis for location being on all the time or only when you run the app, that kind of stuff. Also background updates without a reboot.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But what might got me honestly more excited, because we've had Q out there available for early testing, and now the beta is officially out starting today. But the accessibility features they talked about were really cool. So live caption was this one thing that really amazed me. Can you walk us through what your understanding is of it?
Yeah, okay. So I had a briefing actually with Google a few months ago about kind of this accessibility feature that they were adding in that does live captioning of whatever you say to your phone. So it's actually an accessibility setting, but today they kind of took that to the next level. So because they're doing all of this on-device machine learning, which I think is kind of going to be a big topic for the next while, because we've been talking about edge computing.
Yeah, this is edge computing.
Well,
a lot of it is.
Well, edge computing was on server side, but now we're doing it on device.
Edge on device, yeah.
Edge on device, right? So it's because this is so much faster now, and you don't have to relay things. Your phone can actually do this ML on device, and like it can caption any video on your phone. Anything. Yeah, actually anything. So you can take a video on your phone, you can be playing whatever, and it'll be able to caption it, which is just crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that's going to be introduced as a system-wide feature with Android Q at some point.
Yeah.
Where you can caption anything in real time. Similarly, there'll be a live transcribe, which will basically let you transcribe an entire document.
Yeah.
An entire audio file or whatever into a document.
Right.
And then there's live relay, which I thought was incredible because it's mostly going to be really helpful to hearing impaired people.
So that's the accessibility feature that they added 3 months ago that they're updating.
But basically, imagine you call someone that can't speak or can't hear.
Yeah.
They can basically see a live caption of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they can type back and it talks back at you.
With the Google
And so it can
voice.
be a very completely seamless experience.
Yeah.
And it bridges the gap. I mean, today there's a lot of hardware that exists for people who are hard of hearing that lets them dial in. Like there's always a TDD number for the government services and stuff. But imagine now you could speak to a normal person at the government and they wouldn't even know. It's kind of incredible. So I'm super stoked about that because accessibility is super important, So I think that's it in terms of features, really. I mean, I looked at the list here. We went through everything. Of course, we're skimming the surface. This is I/O. This is where a lot of this stuff gets elaborated on in sessions. And, there's 2 more days of I/O. So we'll probably bring you some more news later. But I would say if by the time you listen to this show, most of the sessions will be covered pretty extensively by those blogs and publications that dig deeper into the developer side of things. So if that interests you, go check it out. But I feel like this was a good keynote. You know? It felt a little less contrived than the duplex last year, which made us kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? That was Orwellian almost.
It was, and there were so many hot takes.
Yeah.
Whereas this one it's weird that we're having hardware at I/O again. So
yeah.
But it's kind of refreshing.
And I like that Sundar spent a bit of time talking about, how they're aware of the bias in AI, that they're working really hard to avoid the bias in AI, And I think that's something that, we really need because it's kind of, I don't want to even begin imagining a future where our AI is just modeled around the majority. I mean, it's going to be really painful.
Right. He talked about how the model actually learns and how they add weights to things that will be more unbiased, right? So they give the example of like, oh, a doctor. Okay, well, we don't want to train it. If you're just training an AI with a ton of photos of a doctor, if there are more photos of male doctors, you don't want to put a heavier weight on the fact that it's male.
Yeah.
So they actually reduce the weight of that, and they make the lab coat like a higher weight because that's more representative of a doctor.
And I think that's smart. Well, listen, I think we've covered most of it. Super exciting, super good I/O, great show, great hardware. At least.
It's always fun every year.
So I want to tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Sure. My main platform is Twitter, and you can find me at Durvid Imel, DurvidImel. On Instagram, I'm just my name, David Imel, and I also have davidimel.com. But I also write and make videos on AndroidAuthority.com and the YouTube channel.
And your videos are hot and sweet and delicious.
Thank you.
Bouquet everywhere. No, I mean everybody's got bouquet everywhere now. But I really like your style. I think your videos are really nice. So if you want to see some nice videos at Pixel 3a, go to AndroidAuthority.com.
Yes.
That's basically the takeaway. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgrl. That's TNKGRL on Twitter and Instagram. Lots of photos on Instagram of the Pixel 3a, so check that out. I posted a bunch today. Remember also that the podcast has a complement YouTube channel, youtube.com/Miriam Jouar, my full name spelled out. You can find my full name on my Twitter account if you don't know how to spell it. No spaces in the YouTube URL. And there's some unboxing hands-ons. I've got a hands-on to the Pixel 3a in there. I'll put all this in the show description. But the bottom line here is subscribe to the podcast. mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and hopefully like the videos. Remember, check the Instagram. And then finally, I would say, if you don't know how to find the podcast, we're on all the big platforms. Google, Apple, Pocket Cast, Overcast. I think Spotify lately has been added. Yeah,
that's good.
We're also on TuneIn Radio, which is cool because I can listen to it in my Tesla. Not that I listen to myself, but I've noticed they have a lot of podcasts. And so I want to thank our sponsor as well before we finish here, Audible.com. Audible is really the best way to get audiobooks, I think, today. And if you want the best selection, check it out. I particularly like the fact that a lot of the books are read by the authors, and it makes the experience really interesting. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because they've been helping the show for a long time, and they have a special deal, 30 days free trial with a link in the description below. And that link is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. If you want to support the podcast, you don't have an Audible account yet, and you want to try it out, maybe you're driving all day and you can't read physically a book, but you want to listen to it, this is your ticket, audible.com. So thanks for being a sponsor. And that's it. Thanks, David, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
That was good times.
Yeah.
Late night, battling it out before midnight at I.O. show. And stay tuned. We'll have another show next week for sure, and maybe something else before that, but I don't want to make promises. So we'll catch you soon, and cheers, everybody.
Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.